Picture this. You're a dictator giving a speech to 50,000 people when suddenly the crowd turns on you live on national television. Within 72 hours, you'll go from absolute ruler to being executed by firing squad in a dirty courtyard. This is the story of how one man's final speech became the spark that ended 24 years of tyranny and changed Romania forever. And it all started with fake applause and a cameraman who forgot to point his camera at the sky. If you love stories about history's most dramatic moment, hit that subscribe button because we're diving into the events that changed the world in ways nobody expected. It's the middle of December 1989. We're in Palace Square in Bucharest, and it's nearly freezing. Over 50,000 people have been assembled here. Many were pulled straight from schools or their workplaces. Some have been standing in the bitter cold for more than 5 hours. They're all waiting for one man, Nicolae Ceaușescu. For 24 years, he's ruled Romania with absolute power, crushing dissent, controlling every aspect of life, building a cult of personality that rivals Stalin himself. A few days earlier, protests erupted in Timișoara after a local priest publicly criticized Ceausescu. When locals resisted the priest's arrest, Ceausescu's soldiers opened fire on civilians. Bodies fell in the streets. News spread like wildfire and protests began erupting across the country. Desperate to restore his image and reassert control, Ceausescu calls for a massive rally in Bucharest to be broadcast live on national television. He'll stand on his balcony, the crowds will cheer, and the nation will see that he's still in command. It'll be the biggest mistake of his life. Ceausescu steps out onto the balcony. He waves to the audience as almost deafening cheers fill the air. But something's off. If you look closely at the footage, almost everyone in the crowd is standing completely still. Only a few people in the front rows are actually moving, clapping, cheering. The sound is fake. It's a pre-recorded track blasting from massive speakers positioned around the square. The entire thing is theater, carefully choreographed to project strength and support. Then Ceausescu begins his speech. At first, things seem to be going well. He's following his script, thanking organizers, praising the party, but then, right in the middle of thanking the rally organizers, screams can be heard from somewhere deep in the crowd. This is not part of the recording. Something real is happening. Someone is actually protesting. "They're shooting," his wife Elena shouts, panic creeping into her voice. They're entering the building, a security guard says off camera. Demonstrators have broken through the barriers and are rushing toward the Central Committee building, the very balcony where Ceausescu is standing. The cameraman, who had specific instructions to point the camera toward the sky if anything unexpected happened, does exactly that. The footage shows sky, then confusion, then chaos. The demonstrators are now directly below Ceausescu. Both he and Elena are leaning over the balcony, shouting at them, telling them to stay back. "This is a provocation," Nicolae says, trying to convince himself as much as anyone else. His voice wavers between authority and desperation. Somehow, security guards manage to push the crowd back behind the barriers. The immediate threat is contained, but it's too late. The illusion of control has shattered. Even as Ceausescu continues his speech, desperately announcing sudden wage increases and higher pensions to placate the crowd, something fundamental has changed. After the speech ends, many in the crowd refuse to go home. They've had enough of the lies, the repression, the fear. They spread through Bucharest, shouting "Down with Ceausescu" and calling for freedom. When Ceausescu hears about this, he's outraged, still in Bucharest, still convinced of his power. He orders tanks, soldiers, and his own secret police to crush the protests by any means necessary. They do. Protesters are shot in the streets. Those who barricade themselves inside buildings are picked off by snipers positioned on rooftops. By morning, there's so much blood in the streets that the military has to use fire hoses and water cannons just to wash it off the asphalt. Meanwhile, Ceausescu is still in his palace. He's actually relieved. He's convinced that the uprising has been crushed. Surely everything will return to normal now, he tells Elena, but he's catastrophically wrong. Before dawn, the first reports arrive. Massive columns of workers are leaving their factories and marching toward the city center. And something has fundamentally shifted. the soldiers and police sent out to control them suddenly refused to shoot. Instead, they joined the protesters. They turned their guns around. The regime's enforcers have become revolutionaries. Ceaușescu immediately holds a crisis meeting with the remaining members of the Communist Party's political bureau in the Central Committee building. At the exact same time, hundreds of thousands of demonstrators surround the headquarters. They're breaking in. With protesters literally minutes away from reaching their offices, Ceaușescu orders his pilot to bring a helicopter to the roof immediately. Both Nicolae and Elena are visibly shaken. They have to be physically carried aboard by their bodyguards. Their faces are completely drained of color. Together with 2 senior officials and 2 bodyguards, they squeeze into the helicopter. They take off just minutes before protesters reach the rooftop. The pilot immediately heads toward Ceaușescu's residence in Snagov, north of the city. Here, Nicolae desperately tries to summon military assistance. He orders the pilot to get 2 helicopters with soldiers as escorts. The answer from the other end is brutally clear. They're on their own. No one is coming to help. The regime has collapsed. The pilot convinces the Ceaușescus to take off again quickly, leaving the 2 officials behind to lighten the load. Nicolae instructs the pilot to fly toward the western city of Târgu Mureș, hoping to reach a loyal garrison. But suddenly, a message crackles over the radio. All flights are grounded. Any unidentified aircraft will be shot down. They have to land. The pilot puts them down on a road between Bucharest and Târgoviște. With that, the Ceaușescus find themselves on their own with just 2 security guards. After flagging down a passing car driven by a bicycle mechanic, they're driven toward the town of Târgoviște. On the way, they listen in horror as the car radio plays news reports about the uprising's victory in Bucharest. It's over. Everyone knows it except them. The bicycle mechanic suggests they hide at an agricultural institute on the outskirts of the city. When they arrive, the institute director shoves the couple into a room and locks the door, trapping them inside. Shortly after, local police arrest both Ceaușescus and hand them over to a military barracks in the city. The new government is determined to bring them to trial as quickly as possible. The day after their capture, Ion Iliescu, the new head of state, signs a decree establishing an extraordinary military tribunal to be carried out immediately at the barracks where they're held. They're accused of genocide, destroying the country's economy, and attempting to flee with over $1 billion stashed in foreign banks. As their crimes are read to them, Nicolae simply laughs. The absurdity of it all has finally hit him. The trial is brief and largely for show. It lasts about 2 hours and takes place without any real possibility for defense or appeal. Ceaușescu refuses to recognize the court, calling it illegal. But it doesn't matter. The tribunal finds both him and Elena guilty. The sentence for both is death by firing squad. The execution will happen immediately. Nicolae tries to appeal the decision. He's denied. Before being led out, he turns to the guards and says he wants to be executed alongside Elena. They accept. A soldier returns with rope to tie their hands, but neither Nicolae nor Elena wants to be restrained. Both argue with the soldiers, saying there's no need, that they won't run. Again, they're denied. They're led out into the courtyard and placed against a wall. Elena begins screaming insults at the execution squad in rage. Other accounts say she starts crying. Nicolae, on the other hand, remains relatively calm in his final seconds. He begins singing the first line of the Internationale, the Workers' International Battle Song. The irony is staggering. A communist dictator singing a song about workers' liberation as workers celebrate his overthrow. The very next day, Romanian television shows footage of the 2 bodies at the foot of the barracks wall as final proof that the Ceaușescus are gone. The regime that seemed unshakable 72 hours earlier has completely disintegrated. In May 1990, Romania held its first free election since 1937. Over the next 2 decades, it joined NATO, entered the European Union, and began rebuilding a society that had been crushed under authoritarian rule for a quarter century. Now, here's a question for you. If you had been in that crowd in Palace Square when the protest started, what would you have done? Option A, join the protesters immediately, risking being shot by soldiers. Option B, stay quiet in the crowd but refuse to leave when ordered, showing passive resistance. Option C, leave the square but spread word about what happened to others throughout the city. Drop your answer in the comments because I genuinely want to know what you think you would have done in that terrifying moment when history changed.